Okay. Good morning. Terrible. Good morning. There we go. All right, this room should be thundering. We're almost 300 strong. So, good morning. My name is Mike Adams. I am the Director of Product Marketing at VMware. I've been at VMware about 8 years, and I think this is my 8th VMworld Europe. So, I'm really excited to be in front of you, and on behalf of all the engineers that bring you vSphere, we're really excited to talk about what's new, what's been going on. Have some updates as well from this, even from this slide deck that have come in recently, and want to make sure I share those with you today. You get a copy of the deck that you see here. I'm told that you'll get that on Friday, I hope. But if you want to stay in contact with me, here's my email address. If you've seen me present before, don't laugh. This is my email address, madams@vmware.com, and you can send me a note at any point. As we go through the deck today, the way I like to present, there's just a lot of material, so I'd like to hold the questions till the end. I will make sure we have questions and have time for that. I'll also stick around for a little while, although we'll probably need to go out in the hall to discuss. I also, if any of your colleagues or you want to come see this again, tomorrow we have a repeat of this. I think it's at 1 or 2 o'clock, so feel free to attend that or pass that information along. Disclaimer, you've been disclaimed, so today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the tech preview information related to what's coming in vSphere. You saw some things today in the 6.0 beta. Raghu talked about fault tolerance and vMotion, and we've talked about a few other things or hinted at things. I'm going to show you a little bit more of that and also talk about other directions, things like the web client or the vCenter server updates. We'll talk about those as well. Here's the big list. So basically we'll talk a little bit about what I call the foundation recap, so some things related to 5.5 as well as some other updates, specifically with 5.5 Update 2 that came out last month. We'll talk a little bit about kind of the state of where vSphere is at. We'll talk a little bit about remote office, branch office, or what we call Robo. We've just released a packaging version of vSphere that fits better for remote and branch offices, and I'll share that with you. We'll talk about some of the newer workloads related to Pivotal CF, so PaaS, Platform as a Service, how we deliver that on a private cloud today. You can also take advantage of that inside of vCloud Air. We'll talk a little bit about big data as well. We're actually having a big data announcement today related to the latest extensions for vSphere in that area. Most of you came for the tech preview, so we'll talk about the new and exciting capabilities that you'll see in the future of vSphere. Some in the closer term future, others longer term. We'll talk a little bit about the vCloud Director transition and how we're doing with that particular project. And then some reminders. I feel like part of this year I talked about how we're making end of availability announcements, things like vSphere 4. How many people are running vSphere 4 right now? Yep. And how many just are afraid to admit it? Okay. Just a few. So that end of life or the end of support happened in May of this year. I know there's still people out there that are running 3 as well, so I should have made them raise their hands. But we'll talk about some of those things. I realize, there's a lot of information when it comes to vSphere, and so we want to make sure we share all of that with you as effectively as possible. And then at the end, we'll take questions. We do have a microphone at the end, so just make sure you wait for the microphone, and then we'll do that. Also, just as a reminder, make sure to fill out your surveys at the end of the session. I like the feedback, and we want to make sure we make these presentations even better in the coming years. Okay, so basically, you've all seen this chart now. I talked about it last year and saying get used to this chart because this isn't going away. We continue to drive out the software-defined data center and the software-defined enterprise, basically how we bring all the technologies together. And obviously, vSphere being a core portion of that right here, encapsulated in the compute virtualization angle. We've done a lot of work recently around networking and also storage, and you're going to see a lot more tie with vSphere with those technologies as we move forward as well, and you expect that as we drive forward. The other thing that I always use this chart for is I make sure to tell people that are using vSphere, we need to understand the greater world, right? I run into so many customers that run just vSphere, and we need to talk about, okay, how do we take the next step toward software-defined data center or using cloud architectures of any type? And a lot of that for some of the smaller environments that you may have, looking at things like vSphere with operations management, that's a good first step. And if you're a little larger, looking at the whole vCloud suite probably makes a lot of sense for some of you. So just keep that in mind as you're continuing to accelerate your vSphere deployment, thinking about how these other pieces can really tie into what you're doing. So that's enough of my kind of spiel on that. The other thing I think is important about vSphere in terms of what's new and where we're going is the tie with applications, right? Applications make everything go. And with traditional vSphere, you know, we've done a lot of work around traditional apps, right? Most of you have probably virtualized at least one business critical application, right? An Oracle, a SQL, Exchange, a SharePoint, an SAP. You've done that, right? And we want to continue to make sure that the platform supports those very, very well. So the capabilities that we have, the performance, the scale, all of that is really designed to continue to drive forward with these efforts. I actually hired a guy on my team that is a Oracle certified master so that we could get more kind of tie and drive into running Oracle on top of vSphere and getting all the best practices that we need for that. We've also done a lot of work recently around SQL Server with a lot of SQL Server experts. I'm hoping to actually hold a large SQL Server panel in Europe in the early part of next year. But the other tie to this, where SDDC kind of comes in, is what we're trying to do for next generation apps. And I mentioned a few of those in the agenda, thinking about things like platform as a service, big data, SAP HANA. You know, all these different and newer types of applications have different types of needs. And actually, you've seen some of the work that we've been trying to do for next-gen applications. You saw the technology called Project Fargo from Kit Colbert yesterday about forking VMs and spinning up many VMs. Also in 5.5, you have the latency controls, right? So the ability to have an in-memory database or an online transaction processing, you know, stock transaction type of environment where we can actually say, okay, this VM, I'm going to physically pin a virtual CPU to a physical CPU. So a lot of work being done on both of these fronts, particularly over here as we try to acquire more new workloads, right? And you'll continue to see us drive in this area and tune vSphere. Because today, if you look at vSphere, right, the product and the platform, it knows a VM is a VM is a VM. It doesn't know anything different other than limits and shares and reservations that you set. It needs to know that, hey, this is a low latency application, or you know, this is this type of application, and then the platform will adjust according to that. And so that's what we're trying to do as we think about both the legacy workloads and also some of the newer workloads. Just as a recap, so on 5.5, how many folks are running 5.5 actively today? Okay, so we have a lot of folks. Good. Last year we talked about this and we added some capabilities, particularly around App HA and also Flash Read Cache. So some of the newer capabilities that are in Enterprise Plus. We continue to really drive forward in App HA. I'll talk about this in the future directions as well because we're adding additional agents to understand not only the restart of VMs, but the restart with the restart of services as well. And so that continues to be a key driver for us. Just HA as a topic continues to be very important as well, and we'll talk a little bit about this in relation to Virtual Center. Flash Read Cache, inserting the Flash Read Cache pool into the data stream path. The VM doesn't even know it's being accelerated there. And then some additional capabilities we added around replication, backup and recovery, and the first time entry of the big data extensions, what was previously known as Project Serengeti. How many folks are running big data on top of vSphere right now? Okay, not too many folks. I will tell you that that generally happens when I talk to an audience like this, but I think for a lot of you, big data is coming toward you, right? There is going to be a group in your audience or in your environment that's going to say, I want to run big data on top of VMware. And right now, we're actually engaged in well over 20 different proof of concepts around the world, and so I'm seeing this trend start to pick up, so don't be surprised if that happens. So I think 5.5 was a good addition to what we did. We introduced some newer capabilities, but again, we need to drive toward an even bigger type of release moving forward. The other thing I think is important in just is kind of the understanding of how we deliver vSphere now, right? So the ability for us to sell vSphere, it comes in kind of three pieces, right? And for most of you, I think you probably bought vSphere kind of standalone by itself. But now, as we look forward, we're really trying to drive vSphere in two areas, right? Either as part of the vCloud suite to create a private cloud. This is what I was talking about before, adding vSphere with other technologies to create what you're trying to do in your environment. And then the other piece for customers more in the transactional type of environment, vSphere with operations management. So for a lot of you, if you've got vSphere right now, think about how you do capacity planning, how you do performance management, and also how you evaluate health of the environment. That's really why we created vSphere with operations management. We said, geez, the vCops standard capability that helps you understand, let's say, in 46 days I'm going to run out of data storage space, that's the piece that we really need for vSphere, right? And what we found was that about 50 VMs and higher, and that's not a very big number, but about 50 VMs and higher, that type of capability really starts to make sense. So if you're not using the vCops piece in combination with vSphere, think about doing that, because I think it's going to provide a major boost to what you're doing. All right, so let's start to talk more about what's going on. And the actual what's new, what's interesting about this particular VMworld is, unlike the past two, we're not releasing a brand new version of vSphere. We have the update 2, but there's no 6.0 release or something like that at this particular show, right? We talked about the beta, but not a big release right now. That will come in the first half of next year. But what we do have is the update 2. I'll talk about this and what the new capabilities are. As you probably realize, in the updates, you don't go ahead and put in new features, right? You put in new support capabilities, maybe greater scale, as you'll see, but you don't put new features in an update release, as many of you know, because you don't want to get into the testing cycle and do something that's a little abnormal. We will release the Robo capability. This came out at the middle part of September, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. What's interesting about it, not only is it a new offering for Robo and remote branch office, but it also is on a per VM licensing metric. So for those remote sites, you can just count up the VMs and share a license across multiple remote sites. And then the last piece, the beta. This has been open since June. How many people are already part of the beta? Okay. How many people are going to sign up today? Okay, good. I've got a little graphic a little bit later so you can sign up. But this is the first time we've really opened up the beta. In the past, the beta process has been a little, I would say, funky at VMware. We would take your name and then we'd have you sign up through your systems engineer or your TAM, and it just didn't work as cleanly as we wanted it to. And now, for the first time, you can actually sign up for the beta yourself on the website and then go through the process, right? We actually have over 12,000 participants around the world for the beta, and that's going to lead to a better product for you and a from us. So please take part in the beta. There's a lot of new capabilities, some which you'll see today and others which we can't talk about just yet, but definitely get involved here. This is the best way to get feedback in addition to other open programs that we have. But I'm really excited to have this open capability now, and I'm hoping in the longer term vSphere beta will be as open as we have it right now. So here's what we're doing in terms of kind of timing. So we had our 5.5 release. We talked about that already. Now we're into 5.5 update 2, which went live in September. We've been going with the beta since June. And then here's what we'll see in terms of tech preview. When I get into this a little bit later, we'll talk a little bit about scale. We'll talk about in-memory database capabilities, the latency. We talked already at this show about container support with Docker, and also the NVIDIA grid capability that will also be coming specifically for desktop virtualization environments. We'll talk a little bit about more detail on vMotion and fault tolerance. So Raghu gave you some guidance today, but I'll give you a little bit more. And then also something we've been talking about for some time, the virtual volume capability. So the newer API to understand basically how to make storage aware of virtual machines, which it currently isn't today. And then basically down the bottom here, this automation section has to do with all the features that we're bringing from vCloud Director into vSphere, right? We know that some of those features are going into the automation center, the vRealize automation center, but some of the features we thought, geez, vSphere administrators really need to have these types of capabilities. And so that's why we're bringing them actually inside of the technology itself. And then also, you'll see some of these down at the Solutions Exchange. So if you want to see some of the capabilities, most of them are down in the hall. So feel free to stop by to actually see a live running demonstration of them. Here we go with the actual pieces of the Update 2. So maybe a little bit hard to read in the back, but you see, obviously we came out with Update 1. Update 2 have support for the latest vCloud suite. So that's the set of technologies that has management and SRM and some of these other capabilities. vCloud Suite, the latest, is version 5.8. I'll mention that a little bit more as we talk about big data. You see up here 6 terabyte host support, so physical memory, 6 terabytes. There aren't too many of those devices on the market yet, but nice to know that you can do it if you want to, or you have that need. So that brings us up in terms of the scale. There'll be many more devices on the market this year that have that size of memory. Support for Haswell EP Legacy, so continuing on our processor work to support the latest and greatest. You also see here VC, as you noticed, vCenter server, some new choices when it comes to the back-end database. How and where do you want to go ahead and deploy it? And so you see here Windows 2012, R2, Oracle 12c, SQL 2012, and also not listed there because I got this late, SQL 2014 is also supported as a back-end database. So feel free to do that. I wanted to make a comment too about Virtual Center. One of the things, and I don't have a slide on this, so it's probably a good time to do it. One of the things about Virtual Center is we're continuing to improve the appliance, and I think as you think longer term, the appliance is going to be the best way to go for management of vSphere. The appliance will scale in the future versions, hopefully sooner rather than later, to the exact same dimensions that the Windows Server deployment will. We will also have, obviously, better capabilities inside the web client in terms of speed and then also not moving things around. People generally have 2 complaints about the web client. It's not fast enough, and number 2, where did you move all the stuff, right? And so we'll fix both of those, right? We'll make the menus flatter, we'll make it more performant, and I will also tell you, is anybody running today vCenter server on Firefox? They run with Firefox? Okay. If you just switch to another browser, I guarantee you will get at least 20% better performance. For some reason, just switching off of Firefox will actually improve your performance for the web client. I don't know why that is, but I've seen it in action, so try that today. Anyway, we'll make some more comments about the vCenter server as well, but just some notes there. The new GOSs there, so guest operating systems, we are supporting for the first time Ubuntu 10 and also Red Hat Linux 7. So those are brand new as of the Update 2 release. And then you also see here vMotion, storage vMotion, interoperability with CBT. What that means is change block tracking. So storage vMotion is actually faster, understanding some of the changes that have been made in order to better do that storage vMotion operation. You do see also vCloud Director. Hopefully any of you that use it are in the process of migrating off or have moved to the 5.6 version for storage or service providers if you're a service provider. But we do have some new updates for 5.5 if you're there. And remember that that technology is still supported through 2017, so you have some time there. But new choices in terms of the database and also the guest operating systems, which are the same, Ubuntu 10 and also Red Hat 7. And then you see the star over here, and I've really positioned this quite well, I thought. It's the first half of next year is when you'll see the next release of vSphere. That is what we're targeting, and you'll see more detail about that as we get into the next year. Here's the beta, so you can go ahead and use the code up here, but again, please sign up for the beta, experience the latest in vSphere. We want to do more. We've done actually a lot of good work, I thought, in Europe as well. We do generally an on-site beta in our Bulgaria office, so we were able to do that this year as well, and hopefully in the future some of you can participate in that, but this is open. The download beta itself is available right now, so please go ahead and help us with the future of vSphere. Okay. Let's talk a little about remote office, branch office. So remote office, branch office, basically for vSphere today is, we had a solution for it, but it was kind of a Band-Aid. It didn't really work all that well. It didn't provide enough capability. It wasn't priced the right way. It wasn't packaged the right way. And it wasn't solving the problem that we have. And what you're seeing here is we've done a lot of research to indicate that a lot of workloads, over 20%, actually run outside the data center. Okay? Geez, well, outside the data center, I don't have vSphere. What am I supposed to do? How can I standardize and how can I bring virtualization, the same virtualization I have in the data center, to the remote office, right? And that's really the problem that we're trying to solve. And you see this across the different segments. It doesn't matter kind of how large or small you are. The existence of remote offices is very viable no matter what type of company and what type of industry you're in. So what we decided to try to solve in these areas was things like, we don't have a whole lot of staff in the remote office. Generally, the staff that's there, they do 60 different things, right? They wear a lot of different hats. So how do you help those folks with, just kind of calming down the infrastructure and providing a very good fundamental baseline? You also generally have an issue of network connectivity at that office. There's not a great pipe sometimes that exists there. And then also, with limited budgets that you have in the data center, think about how the remote offices may have even less budget to do that. So what we really want to try to solve is provide all the benefits of virtualization that you see up the top, the traditional ones that we know of, and then add some other things as well. So better availability and then also better compliance. And this was the piece for vSphere where we didn't offer things like distributed switch or high levels of fault tolerance with the remote office solutions. We just said, okay, you have HA and vMotion and replication and you should be fine. Right? But when we actually went back to the remote offices, people told us, geez, I need distributed switch for compliance, or I need these other types of capabilities in order to better support the remote office, branch office. So this is what we did. A little bit of an eye chart, but we brought out 2 new packages of vSphere to hit the remote office, branch office. So you have the standard version on the left and the advanced version on the right. What's also different about this is we finally realized that most of you, if you're going to protect a remote office or use virtualization in a remote office, you probably have a vCenter server that you want to connect to that remote office. You don't need to buy another vCenter server to have a remote management pocket, right? You'd like to use the existing vCenter server that you have, and that's what's different about these packages. We have the basically ESX code, but we don't offer with this a virtual center. You can buy another virtual center if you want to, but I think for many of you, you just want to tie it into the VC that you already have. Okay? So you see here on this side, there's a lot of capability into the remote office, branch office solution, and then we add things like fault tolerance and storage vMotion, and then the higher end package, add distributed switch and host profiles, even auto deploy, so that you can get a level of standardization and consistency in how you deploy remote offices and branch offices. The other piece, more from a packaging perspective, is that this comes in packages of 25 VMs. Now, the reason that this is important is most remote and branch offices, they'll have somewhere between 2 and 10 virtual machines, right? And usually 1 to 2 physical hosts. Okay, fine. So why a package of 25, right? Well, the nice thing about this licensing is actually the packaging can work across remote offices. So if I have 10 remote offices and each has 2 VMs, I can buy 1 package of this. Right? I can spread that across all of them. If I add new remote offices, I can get more capability with this as well. So that's kind of the consistency, not only adding capabilities, but changing the metric so it's more suited to what you're actually doing. Plenty more to talk about with this. Please feel free to talk more about the remote office with me later. Platform as a service. So we've been offering platform as a service with Pivotal on top of vSphere since November of last year. We updated this year in May, and the update in May and the recent update that we made brought the ability to run this through vCloud Air. So it's not run as a service, but you can go ahead and say, do I want to deploy it on vSphere in the private cloud, or do I want to deploy it in the Air environment? So for any of you looking at platform as a service, this is the best way to do that. Think about platform as a service as a great way to run non-packaged applications. If you have folks that are developing apps and they need an environment to basically house the app and develop the app, this is the best way to do it. So like big data, I think a lot of you may not really deal with PaaS on a consistent basis, but it is coming to you. We see so many big customers that are coming to us and saying, geez, I don't really know, as the vSphere admin, I don't know much about PaaS, but I know I need to run it, right? Somebody's asking me, some group is going to ask me to do that. And so we do have that capability now, and Pivotal is the market leader when it comes to platform as a service technology. So feel free to take a look at this. This, like big data, is also accelerating very, very quickly within our customer base. In addition to that, the big data piece, which actually we'll be making an announcement today in New York at the Hadoop World Technology Summit. We've been offering this since even before 5.5, it was actually called Project Serengeti, so you could use code in combination with vSphere Now at the Enterprise and Enterprise Plus levels, this technology comes with vSphere. And the idea of running big data on top of vSphere really comes out of the fact that you need to have a lot of flexibility when you come to run big data. You also need to have better availability that's not in the distribution of big data or Hadoop itself. And so you need to have those types of capabilities in order to run this. And so we're slowly, as I said, starting to engage with a lot of customers to run big data on top of vSphere. And the announcement today will actually talk more about how we're better integrated with the Cloudera Manager, as well as a few other of the management layers of Hadoop. So if somebody comes to you, don't be surprised if someone in your organization is going to come to you fairly soon to talk about how to run one of the Hadoop distributions on top of vSphere. Also, what came out in the vCloud suite, we talked about this both at this show and also in San Francisco. You see the second bullet up there when the vCloud Suite 5.8 came out, the support of Hadoop 2 distributions. So the ability for us to do that also housed within the vCloud Suite as well, in addition to some of the other announcements that we did make. All right. So let's get into the stuff that everybody came to talk about, the technology previews. Again, things that you will see in the short term, and then I'll mention some things you'll see over in the long term as well. So first of all, what are the design goals behind vSphere as we move forward in creating more kind of new technology? Okay, so the idea, obviously, to continue to have the best platform that's out there. I've had a lot of discussions with customers, and they say, geez, there are other choices out there that I could be making. You need to continue to accelerate vSphere so that I know that I'm getting not only the best capability, but I have kind of the innovation side of what's going on. You're continuing to innovate and deliver things that others are not. And I think you will see that, and that's continuing to be a design goal that we have. The support of those applications that I talked about in the middle here, so continuing to make sure we're focused on the app, right? It's all about the app, traditional or legacy, and then the newer apps. Got to be able to support those and some of the newer architectures, not only things like containers, but also better capability when it comes to things like OpenStack, right? And then the last piece, getting to scale, right? Operational scale. And you'll see some of those today. Obviously, some of the numbers that we show you, you look at the numbers and say, geez, 128 virtual CPUs, right? You kind of go, wow, that's great. I'm not quite there yet, but at some point you will be. And when I show you the numbers for scale, keep in mind that it's about, if you're going to invest in a platform and you're going to use that 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, you've got to make sure that that platform will scale with you. And so that's why the numbers that you see in the scale are always way ahead of where you're actually at this particular point in time. Okay, so let's talk about a few things. So vMotion. Coming vMotion will have 3 new capabilities, right? We'll be able to go across data centers. We'll be able to go across distributed switches. And in just a second, I'll show you a little bit more about long-distance capability. But this is really a driving effort, and you've seen us change vMotion over time, right? We've added better capabilities so it supported additional latency, right? We went from 5 milliseconds in latency to now supporting 10. It probably does a little bit more than that, and I'll show you in just a second. Well, we'll get up to 100. In this case, also, you can move in vMotion today. You can move across some of the boundaries within the cluster, right? But you can't move across vCenters, right? And we've been building on this. We've had the vMotion without shared storage, and now this is kind of the culmination of all these efforts that we can do vMotion across the layer 2 network and then go across vCenters and also across the distributed switch boundaries. So really excited about some of these new use cases that we have for migration. And probably the biggest and well-known of that is the long-distance capability. And I apologize, I should have brought a European map, but this is the one that the engineers gave me. But the idea around long-distance vMotion is now you'll be able to support up to 100 milliseconds in round-trip transfer time. That's what the RTT is. And just so you know, just as a mental marker, in the United States, going from West Coast to East Coast, it's about 50 to 60 milliseconds. So this should be able to handle that, no problem. I also think in testing, East Coast to Europe should be no problem as well. So the ability to now use vMotion in a very different way becomes very important. Also important to understand is, I think Raghu in the talk this morning, he did this in San Francisco as well, he talked a little about integration with NSX. The core base technology, you don't need to have NSX in order to do long-distance vMotion. NSX will make it better and enhance that. Other things that will also enhance this, if you tie this together with replication, if you're already doing active-active replication, vMotion can basically piggyback on that replication and understand what may be already there at that other site. So keep that in mind as well. Also important to realize when these vMotion new capabilities come out, there are going to be additional requirements around the environment. So 10 gig being the minimum, right? Thinking about the pipe that we have between these environments is going to be very, very important. So the latest chipsets, the 10 gig minimum, those types of things will be very clear on the actual deployment methodology and the requirements that you'll need for this type of environment. But very, very important. All right, so that's the vMotion capabilities. Also very popular, and we've been talking about this for years, fault tolerance. Today, fault tolerance is, for a lot of customers, effectively useless, right? Because they have a lot larger than one vCPU VMs, right? That's the limitation of fault tolerance today. We couldn't make the record and replay technology work on more than one vCPU. So what we did is actually we changed the underlying technology to fast checkpointing. Fast checkpointing isn't a new technology, it's been around for years, but now the ability for us to use it is the game changer. And now you can have up to a 4-way vCPU VM running with fault tolerance when this is delivered. Okay, so 1-way, 2-way, 4-way, all of that available now. And when you do this, one of the updates that we have is on the host when you're running this fault tolerance, you can have up to 8 vCPUs total running for fault tolerance. So what that means is I can have 2 4-way VMs, or I could be running 4 2-way VMs in fault-tolerant mode. Or I could run 8 1 vCPU VMs. I wouldn't do that because I could do that today. But we will have a limitation on the number of VMs that you can run per host in the fault-tolerant mode. Okay? Keep in mind, too, you can also combine this with HA. So you could be running one VM in fault-tolerant mode, and the others on the host can be running HA for better protection. Also, some people often ask me too, do you have plans for 8-way, right? 8-way vCPU. Yes, we actually do have that running in the lab as well. It's not trivial to obviously deliver that, so we're going to start with the 2-way and 4-way capability. 8-way at some point. I will tell you though, when we get to 8-way, I guarantee you that 40 gig in terms of the interconnect is going to be a minimum, or we're going to need InfiniBand or something in order to transmit that much data between the two hosts. So keep that in mind as we get toward this. But you'll see an implementation of this obviously very quickly here, and then we'll expand upon that as we move forward in terms of vSphere delivery of greater FT type of capability. But so it's almost here. I was tired actually at last year's VMworld. I kept saying I'm tired of talking about it's coming, and you're tired of asking me when this is coming. So I will tell you that this is very, very close next year in terms of the delivery for fault tolerance. We will actually have the technology. I think the other thing too that people ask me about related to this is, can I use this for virtual center availability, right? And we're going to work on delivering that. We're actually in discussions right now with our availability team to make and document how to use fault tolerance for virtual center availability. And so that's one thing that we'll probably come out with a document on. And speaking of documents, one of the other things, we're going to come out with a document on which applications would be best to run in FT and which ones may not be so good to run in FT mode. And I think that's going to be very important because I'm anticipating in next year, people will come and say, yep, let's try it. Let's turn on fault tolerance. And then they may see something abnormal or may not like the results. So we need to be very cognizant of the type of workloads we run with FT. Scale and VM sizing. So I got a lot of grief at VMworld San Francisco about putting pluses in. People said, Mike, pluses are not a roadmap. And I agree. The reason that I show pluses is we don't know what those numbers will eventually be. We do know some of the nearer term numbers, but the longer term kind of scale and size, we generally hold those numbers up until the very release itself. So the configuration maximum document that we have, it generally comes out just a few weeks before GA. And the reason that we do that is we want to hold it until we understand the exact numbers that we can actually deliver. So you see here, things around the CPU sizes, a little bit more on the memory. Remember, with the update 2, we actually have 6 terabyte host support already. So that is even changed from this. And then the bigger one I think you'll see next year is hopefully we'll be able to increase the cluster size from 32 up to 64. And many of you may say, well, geez, I'm not even running even close to 32. But again, remember, the idea on the sizing is that you keep ahead of where folks are at. And I think you'll see a lot more people that'll increase the cluster size. Obviously, this was a big one too, the VMDK size moving from 2 terabytes to 62. And remember why it's not 64, because we need some headroom for the file system and snapshots and things like that. But this ability to increase that, I think, really helped a lot of folks when it came to 5.5. And in future versions, again, we'll probably have something even greater than that. But scale, performance, every time there's a vSphere release, you will see some update to this type of chart because we want to continue to grow the size and grow the scale. HA and also component protection. This is a future as well in terms of what we're doing. Application HA, which not only provides the HA technology, but also restarts the service. So in conjunction with our Hyperic technology, you don't have to actually download all sorts of different code. It's all done in the App HA download itself. But right now, App HA only has a handful of agents that it runs with. So we need to increase the number of agents. We'll do that. And just increase the overall functionality of App HA itself. It was definitely a 1.0 technology. So we've kind of kept that in mind as well. In addition to that, this piece called component protection. This will probably come out as part of HA of the future, but the idea is that, you know, we've had some struggles with things like all pass down and some of the other instructions of vSphere when different things happen and you trigger an HA event. Well, in the case of storage, which we'll do first, and then network we'll do longer term, why do I need to trigger an HA event if I have 2 paths to storage? Right? If I lose this path, fine, but I've got this other guy that actually is accessing the storage. So why do I need to trigger an HA event in that scenario? And the answer is I don't. I should be able to be smart enough that I don't need to do that. And so that's the first release of component protection. If I have a redundant path to storage, I will not trigger an HA event if that is the case. And longer term on the network side, this won't be short term, it'll be long term. We'll do that same on the network. If I have a redundant network path, I don't need to trigger an HA event. I can actually be smart enough on the HA side to not trigger that event based on the fact that I have another network connection. So keep that in mind. Again, a lot going into the future of availability and some of these different types of capabilities for vSphere. Here's what I was talking about a little bit before too around latency-sensitive applications and understanding the jitter effect. There are things like, you know, in-memory databases, stock transaction processing environments, where we need to be a better understanding of what type of application is running in the VM. And I think this is really goodness for you guys in the fact that we're trying to be sensitive around what we do, right? And so as I mentioned before, you can actually pin a virtual CPU to a physical CPU if you need to make sure that this particular low latency app has kind of the attention that it needs in terms of delivery. And there are pluses and minuses to doing that. Once you pin a virtual CPU to a physical CPU, you can imagine kind of what happens to some of the other VMs on the host. But again, there's trade-offs to everything that you do. So it's important that we have this type of capability and we continue to understand what is in the app, what is running in that VM, so that we have better capability. And you see things here, we're already doing some of these today where we can understand the top 2 bullets around sensitivity and vCPU affinity rules. This one down here in vMotion in-guest notification, that'll be longer term where we can do some better kind of understanding and notification of, hey, this is a low latency sensitive app. So we'll continue to really drive on these. Today this is a pretty easy setting too. There's a setting that says literally low latency VM. You check that and we will go ahead and enable this type of capability. So any of you running 5.5, you could actually check this out right now, and then obviously we'll continue to have it as we move forward. Okay, other new cool stuff that's coming. Content library. So if any of you are familiar with vCloud Director, this is a technology we had inside of vCloud Director and now pushing over to vSphere, okay? One of the things that's really struggling for folks is, geez, I've got a template over here, and I'd like to use it over in this environment. I have an ISO image over here. I have scripts that I use, and I have to dive into, you know, an NFS share or some other type of repository to figure that out. I don't want to do that anymore. Give me a common repository where I can go ahead and store templates and ISO images and scripts and things like that, and we can go ahead and do that with the new content library capability. This capability is also cross Virtual Center, so that's kind of the point. So we have one master library, and you can see I have multiple virtual centers that will tie into this. And so we do a share and publish model. So you share out the template, and then you can go ahead and share that with, or publish it and share it across multiple vCenter servers. So of all the newer features, I think this is a big one that folks are really excited about as we start to deliver on putting vCloud Director, more of the technology, into vSphere. So share, sync your environments together so that you can go ahead and better utilize what you've already created. In addition to that, the concept of the virtual data center, you'll see this labeled in other places as VDC. So the concept of the virtual data center, it makes sense, right? We've done some stuff like this with profile-driven storage and storage DRS and some of these other capabilities, but we've never tied together the whole picture, right? Tied together for me compute, storage, and network in this type of environment. So what you're seeing here, this is more of a complex slide, and I'll do the build in just a second. But basically, for each individual VM, I can have the essence of a barcode, right? So think about today when you get a package delivered to you. When the guy at the door scans the package with that little device that he has, it tells them, how long the package has been on the road, how much it weighs, who it's going to, what the contents of the package. That type of thing is exactly what we're trying to do, right? So you see in this case, this VM that I'm creating, I wanted to have 2 vCPUs, 1 GB of RAM. I'm going to tag it in the Microsoft bucket, so we'll use tags in conjunction with this because it's probably a Windows-based VM. I want to make sure it's replicated, so there's probably something pretty important there. It's probably a Tier 1 or Tier 2 app. And then I want to have it use the red network, right? And the red could be anything from middle tier to most aggressive. And so what vSphere will do is it will translate this at the data center level rather than just at the cluster level, right? We're trying to take it up a notch. And so once I do this, that will go ahead and effectively say, okay, I want to place it on this type of storage because that's replicated in this type of environment, and then use the red network as we said before. So this idea of automated placement at a higher level, not just the DRS capability, but everything related to that. That's really what we want to drive into to make sure you place this correctly in the right spot. Because how do you do this today, right? It's either what I remember about my vSphere environment, or I dive into a spreadsheet and says, geez, I think it's best to put it over here or over here, right? Let's not dive into anything. Let's have a pre-programmatic response to how vSphere will handle these groups of VMs, right? Put in your logic, and then vSphere will go and say, based on what you told me, I'm going to put this VM here. And here's the instantiation of that. You can see up on the top, this VM, I'm going to put 2 tags on it. I'm going to put the Detroit tag on it, or let's talk about something here. I could put the Paris tag on it, and I put it the DMZ tag on it, and you can see that I will select the right piece down below. Instead of saying, geez, I think this is the case, or I don't know, I can make the accurate response every single time. So we're very excited about this. The other piece behind this is today, this is underneath one vCenter server. So you do this underneath one vCenter server. In the future, we'll do it across multiple vCenters. But to first get it out, we needed to do it underneath one virtual center to begin with. The use cases for this, kind of interesting. You can do lots of really cool stuff. Number one, you can do some stuff around license kind of enforcement. So for example, I don't have let's say an Oracle license in this particular bucket. Okay, don't put any of the VMs that run Oracle into this particular area. Also good for upgrade. Okay, if I relabel these and said, okay, this is the new, let's say vSphere 6 environment, right? And this was 6, but maybe this was 5.5. You could actually put a label on it that says, okay, when I upgrade, just go ahead and push everything here. And vSphere will actually automatically move the VMs from that environment into the newer environment as part of the upgrade cycle. So we're pretty excited about the ability to now use technology like this to implement upgrades and better capabilities for vSphere. So again, new things that you'll see from the high-level vCenter server piece. The other pieces I wanted to mention too is we will continue to update the web client. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. There will be a patch actually this quarter to web client. So for the 5.5 environment, we will release a patch that will improve performance. But you will see major updates to the performance of the web client in the very next release of vSphere. So much so that some tasks that took us somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes, I actually saw some screenshots and demos last week that were actually well under 30 seconds now to do the exact same function. So things like the inventory, the flattening of some of the menu items, the movement of the recent tasks back to the bottom of the environment, those types of things are very, very important. And what you will also see in the future of vSphere, for the short-term future, we will still maintain the web client and the C# client. So the C# client will continue to exist for some period of time, and then eventually the web client will become the primary or the only interface that we offer for vSphere. That hasn't happened yet where we've retired the C# client, so just keep that in mind. We need the C# client for baseline capabilities, for update manager, we'll still need that. We also need it for the host individual management piece, but longer term, the web client is the way forward. So keep in mind the web client, get to know it, get to learn it, because it's going to be the way forward. It's the better architecture for us as we deliver that, and we know we need to do more around the performance and make things better. Don't move things around. I like the C# client, but we're going to make the web client even better than it is today. Also, as part of the technology previews, eventually in the future, you will also see a web client that's HTML5 backended instead of the Flash backend that we have today. HTML5, when we originally developed the web client, wasn't in a good spot, right? It wasn't the standard kind of it is today. It renders differently per browser, and it will be better in the future so that we can use the web client on an HTML5 backend. All right, so that's my soapbox around web client. The other thing too, that's kind of also part of this, vCenter server availability. We will introduce some better capabilities for that. We did end of life the heartbeat, which I'll talk about, but we will introduce new capabilities for VC availability, and we'll talk more about that as we go. vCloud Director transition, that's what VCD is. Again, we announced this last year at VMworld Europe, but we're continuing down the path for this. So again, moving the functionality out of vCloud Director into either vSphere or into the Automation Center and the new vRealize tagging. And the reason that you're doing that is you're moving the self-service and the governing piece up into the Automation Center and moving other capabilities like the content library, like virtual data center, like the policy-based management into vSphere. Okay, so that's the design goal. We are still continuing down this path. We are going to offer a migration tool to move you from vCloud Director into Automation Center. It's most likely going to be part of our professional services organization, but we will have that in the near future. Also, for any of you who are service providers, we have kept vCloud Director going for service providers only. So if you are a service provider, you can use the 5.6 version of vCloud Director. That's not available to enterprise customers, but it is available to service providers. And we've got a few sessions on that this week here in Europe. If you're interested in doing that, we have a whole separate team that deals with that. So keep that in mind. Also, if you're on vCloud Director, again, remember, you should be already planning your migration off or just thinking about where you're going to kind of migrate to over time. So keep that in mind and let us know if we can help with any of that. All right. Just before we get into questions, some of the end of availability reminders for vSphere. So I felt like a lot of my time this year has been talking about this. So vSphere 4.x did go end of availability in May 20th of this year. I realize there are some of you who are using it still. That's fine. Just keep in mind that the support did end in May. Also, Lab Manager, the product that would never die, has finally met its end of support. The reason that this was tied together was vSphere 5 was not supported with Lab Manager. So the last version of Lab Manager did not support vSphere 5, so that's why we tied those two together and also end of life that in May of this year. Heartbeat, the availability characteristic for vCenter server, has also end of life for business and technology reasons. Availability of VC continues to be something very top of mind for us. I made some comments about fault tolerance working with it. Also, you'll see some new capabilities where we're going to be watching a lot of the processes related to vCenter. And then longer term, we'll actually introduce a native kind of HA functionality for vCenter Server, right? We're not kind of there just yet. We're more at kind of the watch the processes and make sure we can restart those. But we know we need to do more around VC availability. And we have a lot of the VC team is actually here this week. So feel free to come and talk to me. I'd be happy to put you in touch with those folks if you want to give input. But I think we know that we need to do more around availability for Virtual Center. Also, the SUSE Linux licenses that we used to give out with vSphere licenses, that has also been end of availability. So no longer when you purchase a vSphere license do you get a SLES license any longer. If you already have them, you can go ahead and use them up until, I think it's 2017. And then also in this timeframe, VMworld, we've actually end-of-life the Essentials and Essentials Plus for Robo, only the Robo versions of those, in favor of the new remote branch office SKUs that I showed you earlier. So a better way of attacking the remote office, branch office. If you do have these, we will help you upgrade to the newer remote office, branch office set of capabilities. All right. So with that, I want to stop for Q&A. Just a reminder, as we get into the Q&A cycle too, also be filling out your surveys so that we get better information about the session. But let's go ahead and start with the Q&A and see if there is a microphone that is around. All right, I'll pause for just a second. For those of you who are leaving, thank you very much for attending and enjoy the rest of VMworld 2014. Thank you very much.